Hi, and welcome back to Cambridge A-Levels Business Studies, specifically about stakeholders on Chapter 5. And today we will be looking at conflicts in stakeholder objectives. Now, what does conflict of objectives mean? Now, let's take an example of two stakeholders in a business. All right, let's look at Alison, who's an employee of your organization, and you have Donald, who represents all the other shareholders, right? Of both, you would know that Alison is demanding for a better salary, right? And while Donald, who represents the shareholders, would want more shares, of course, right, to increase his value in the company. Now, what does a business or an employer like you do when you are faced with these conflicts? Because the conflicts mean that it will be hard for you to issue more shares or to provide shares to Donald, at the same time increase salary for Alison. All right, unless you would have a lot of money to spare for both stakeholders, but most of the time you would have to decide one over the other. All right, so this is what it means by having a conflict. A conflict of objectives means that normally one party will be discriminated is a very strong term to use, but maybe sidelined over the other, depending on how much the company can provide at a particular point in time. Now, let's look at an example of conflicting stakeholder objectives. This is an example of a business decision, right? So factory A shuts down its operations in country X due to rising cost. Okay, and factory A then decides to move its operations to country Y due to lower cost. So before we can look at more explanation on this example, you would see that there will be parties who will be benefiting from this decision of factory A to shut down its operations, and there will be parties who would be losing out on based on what factory A is going to do. So who benefits? Workers in country Y, where factory A decides to move its operations to the local community, right? Because of course there will be more employment opportunities in country Y because of factory A's decision to move. Suppliers, where factory A will depend on in country Y, as well as the government of country Y in terms of tax and things like that, right? Now, who would lose? Definitely and most certainly the people in country X, where you look at the workers, local communities, suppliers, and the government because of loss of tax revenue, employment opportunities, and so forth. So this tells you an example of how sometimes a decision of a business would have conflict, would create conflict between stakeholders, and where one party would benefit over the other. All right. So as you can see that a certain decision made by a company would have an impact to various stakeholders. In the case of factory A, who's shutting down its operations in country X would be on the losing party, whereas country Y, where factory A is moving its operations to, will fall under the winning party because of the benefits that they would gain. Now, looking at this, what should businesses do, right, when a decision such as this is made and various stakeholders are affected, right? So we know that there will be impacts to businesses, but what businesses can do is to reduce the size of the negative impact to stakeholders. The negative impact to stakeholders here refers to country X, where factory A would be moving its operations into. Okay, now what are the types of examples that the factory A could do to minimize the negative impact? Now, one of it would of course be looking at making redundancy payments to workers who would be losing their jobs. Redundancy payments here refers to money or salaries for a number of months being given to workers as compensation for losing their jobs. In this case, the money could be used for them to control or to continue surviving in a couple of months while they look for a new job or until they get a new job. At the same time, Factory A could also look at supporting the local community during their move in terms of making sure that their move is clean, an easy one without affecting or causing more impact to the environment, which is related to the next point as well. Protect the environment as much as possible, right? Which basically means when they came into country X to start their whole operations, it was with good intentions to provide the best to the local community, right? Such as jobs and, you know, to actually build up a good ecosystem for the whole community. But when they leave, they would also need to make sure that they leave in good manner, in good faith as well, to make sure that there is no traces of you know, chemicals left behind, or factories that the factory has left abandoned, is left dirty or messy and things like that, you know, where it will become difficult for future tenants to actually use the factory or the premises. So these are some of the examples that businesses could do to minimize the negative impact, because when you leave or provide or make a decision in a conflicting decision, there would be one party who would be gaining more than the other. And this is what businesses can do to minimize the impact faced by the losing party, or the negative impact faced by stakeholders. And so we've come to the almost last slide of this presentation. And what have we covered today in conflicting stakeholder objectives? You have learned on how to weigh up the different approaches to problems caused by conflicting objectives. You were able to identify what could be the potential problems when a decision is made on different parties, and you're also able to decide or look at the different approaches on how to manage these problems, you know, how to mitigate these problems. And I hope that you were able to pick up as much as possible from today's short lesson. And yes, that's the end of my presentation for today. If you have any concerns or questions, you may drop me an email at my email address shown in this slide today. If you like this video, please share it and like it. And yeah, I hope you have a good day today as we meet again in the next video.